the hidden problem with online woodworking plans. Most people think their woodworking projects fail because of their skills. But that's not what's really happening. They follow the plan carefully, measure twice, cut slowly, try to do everything right. And still, somewhere in the middle, the project starts to fall apart. At first, it's subtle. A joint doesn't quite align. A measurement feels slightly off. You double-check the diagram, go back a step, try to adjust. But the more you move forward, the worse it gets. And eventually, you hit that moment. You're standing in your shop, halfway through a build, staring at something that doesn't look like what you imagined. So you stop, not because you want to, but because you don't know how to fix it. And that's where most projects end. Not at the beginning, but right in the middle. What makes this frustrating is that, on the surface, everything looked fine. The plan had diagrams. It had steps. It even looked professional. So naturally, the assumption is, I must have done something wrong. But that assumption is where things start to go off track. Because what most people don't realize is that many woodworking plans aren't actually designed to be followed from start to finish. They're designed to look complete. And there's a big difference between those two things. A plan can show you what the final piece should look like without truly showing you how to get there. And that gap between appearance and execution is where most of the problems live. You'll often see a clean diagram of a finished piece. But when you go step by step, something feels missing. The transition from one stage to another isn't clear. Critical details get skipped. The order of assembly isn't fully explained. And those missing pieces don't seem like a big deal at first, until you try to build. Because in woodworking, small gaps in instruction don't stay small. They compound. A tiny misunderstanding early on turns into a visible flaw later. A slight measurement inconsistency turns into joints that won't close. And suddenly, you're not building anymore. You're troubleshooting. That's the part no one talks about. Most of the time spent on DIY woodworking isn't actually building. It's trying to interpret incomplete information, trying to guess what the plan meant, trying to fix something that was never clearly explained in the first place. And over time, that creates a pattern. You start projects with excitement. You hit confusion somewhere in the middle. You slow down, you second guess, and eventually you stop. Not because you lack the ability, but because the process stops making sense. Now here's where it gets more interesting. If you look at how experienced builders work, they don't rely on guesswork. They rely on clarity. Not just in measurements, but in sequence, in structure. In understanding exactly what happens first, what comes next, and why. Because woodworking isn't just about cutting wood, it's about following a precise order of decisions. And when that order isn't clearly defined, everything becomes harder than it should be. Think of it like assembling something without knowing the exact sequence. Even if you have all the parts, even if you have the right tools, if the order is unclear, you end up backtracking, undoing, redoing. And that's where most of the frustration comes from. Not from complexity, but from missing structure. The real issue isn't that woodworking is difficult. It's that many plans remove the structure that makes it manageable. And once that structure is gone, the entire process starts to feel unpredictable. That's the turning point most people never see. Because they're focused on improving their technique, buying better tools, watching more tutorials. When in reality, the biggest variable isn't their skill. It's the quality of the plan guiding the process. Once that shifts, everything else starts to change. Projects become more predictable. Mistakes become less frequent. Progress feels smoother, not because the work got easier, but because the path became clearer. And when the path is clear, you stop hesitating. You stop second-guessing every step. You start moving forward with confidence instead of uncertainty. That's when woodworking starts to feel different. Less like trial and error, and more like execution. Now, this doesn't mean every plan out there has these problems, but it does mean that the difference between a frustrating build and a smooth one often comes down to something that's easy to overlook: how complete the plan actually is. Not how it looks, not how it's presented, but how well it guides you from the first cut to the final assembly. That's the part worth paying attention to, because once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself for projects that didn't work out, and you start evaluating the process that led you there. If you want to go deeper into this, there's a structured breakdown in the description that walks through what makes a plan actually usable and how to recognize it before you start your next project. You can also subscribe if you want more videos that break down the hidden factors behind why projects work or don't. Because once you see the structure behind the process, you don't just build better projects, you build with clarity.